Welcome to the Invisible Cabaret podcast. We are a cabaret troupe that focuses solely on stripping away the stigma surrounding mental health through variety entertainment, ranging from ballet and burlesque through to song and spoken word and everything in between. During the pandemic, we've been working off stage to produce our podcast, taking the time to catch up with our friends and colleagues to talk about mental health, performance, the relationship between the two, and much, much more. If you're a creative who's got a story or two to share and would like to appear on our podcast, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. But today we have a first on the Invisible Cabaret podcast. We've made our way through the troupe and now we're inviting other creatives to share their side of things. And we have the wonderful Burly Photographer. Woo, 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 woo.
I'm not sure who this wonderful person is, but I'm here, so I'm filling in until the wonderful Burly Photographer
Yeah, he
arrives.
couldn't make it, so...
Yeah, he was busy.
Like the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Exactly, yeah, but less talented.
No, not at all. Stop. Just stop right there. The Burly Photographer is also known as Rich. As always, I am joined by Rosie Verbose.
Hello. I did a little face thing, but you couldn't see because it's a podcast. But I framed myself.
Did a little Vogue.
Suddenly she became like Madonna. Obviously you can't see this, but there was a whole hand thing going on.
It was amazing. I had a cape. Yeah. It was a whole thing. Yeah,
it was absolutely.
And I am Ferrero, Rochelle. It's wonderful to be here on the podcast, and it's wonderful to be joined by the Burly Photographer. We're so excited to have you. We have featured on your podcast before, so if anybody would like to listen back, go and check out the Burly podcast where Ros and I were featured. And so, of course, one of our first guests outside of the troupe had to be you to repay the favour.
That's very nice, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's really nice to be talking to cabaret people. I've really missed you. I've obviously missed you particularly, but I've missed everybody in general. Help.
Yeah, we're in a cabaret and people deficit at the moment, aren't we? How's lockdown been for you, Richard?
Lockdown has been relentless. I think when you appeared on my podcast, I was actually quite enjoying it. I have a job. I'm a delivery man for Tesco's. And at the time, we were having clap for delivery men and clap for carers, and it was really, really encouraging. I've got to say, how many of the months on it is, it's the amount of work and the amount of effort and the amount of stress that's going on is still the same as it was for me and for my colleagues in April, and it's just going on and on. I could really do with a break from COVID-19. It was easy at the beginning. The relentlessness of it is getting on my nerves a bit now.
Is it about being worn down more than anything?
Well, you catch me on a day when I had a really big delivery yesterday, so I'm still recovering from that. What we've found is that on the doors, talking to the residents where I am in North West Surrey, people are actually ordering more stuff and they are still concerned. So they use us a bit like their father confessors, and so they'll tell us how stressed they are and how worried they are. I found that quite difficult to deal with because we're getting more and more work. And, I shouldn't complain because there are lots of creatives that don't have any work. And that's another problem when you see your friends really struggling for a long time. I've never lived through anything like this before.
And also, if you're quite like an absorbent, sensitive person, which generally as creatives, we tend to be a little bit more porous, I think, where that's concerned. So if people are, using you as a sounding board for their stresses, I know if I put myself in that position, I would be wiped. Are you managing to do any sort of photography stuff? Are you flexing that muscle?
When we last spoke, I was producing a book of rainbows. That actually has gone and been published, and you can actually buy it in a local bookshop where I live, which was rather sweet.
Oh, that's lovely.
Because it's the bookshop of the local museum in a place called Chertsey in Surrey. I donated all my pictures to them. They're trying to build an archive of the local area in COVID. And if you live in London and you've got records of what COVID was like, I know the Museum of London is looking for donations of pictures and diaries and things. And they said, we really like this rainbow book. Can we sell it in the bookshop? Of which I said yes. So I've now become a published photographer, which is rather nice.
That's wonderful.
Well, that's something great to come out of lockdown. That's lovely.
I've actually been more creative. I produced another book. I like taking photographs of people, and because there's no cabaret, I took my camera to work and took loads of photographs of my colleagues, and then I published it as a book to give everybody as a souvenir. But I also, when the Black Lives Matter demos were going, I'm also a demo photographer. I went up and photographed one of the demos, and then there was a demo locally, because I thought that was important to record, and I'm looking for more things to photograph. Cabaret has actually restarted in a small extent. So I'm taking photographs for Lady Luscious at her showcases. So I've been to the Albany a couple of times, and she's managed to produce a socially distanced cabaret show.
How does it feel? Does it feel different? Does it feel the same?
I love it. I love it, but it does feel different in that you can't heckle. What Lady Lush has done, which is absolutely fantastic, is she provides musical instruments on all the tables, so bells and things to bang and stuff. So you can still have an audience reaction. As a dinosaur, I found it quite difficult to adjust. And I got told off a couple of times for standing too close to people. And
that's got to be tough, yeah.
It's nice for it to be there. I have to be honest, I'm not sure how sustainable it is in the very long term. Just financially, you can only have a third of the audience, so I don't know how viable it is.
Well, we'll see. I'm so heartened that creatives are being so resilient and finding ways to make the stuff they love work.
I wonder if there's a way of still being able to photograph kind of online shows.
I don't know. That's the one thing that's been hard for me personally, is that there are lots of shows, and there are lots of people on Instagram still taking their own photographs. As time has gone on, I've found myself less able to be creative. It was all right at the beginning because it was new and it was a new impulse. Now I actually find it much more difficult, and sometimes I've thought, I can't be bothered, which is terrible.
That's very interesting, because I feel the opposite. Okay. So when we first started in lockdown, I was paralysed. There was so much pressure, like, you should be creating, everybody else is, look at all this time you've got on your hands, you should be creating. And it absolutely paralysed me. I was like, oh my God, now everybody's looking at me to go away and do something incredible, and I can't bring myself to do it. Now the pressure's turned down a little bit, and I am desperate for creative outlets for me to stretch my creative legs. And so now I'm finding it a little bit easier, but I know that the majority of people are the other way around.
But that's great, right? Because, like, between us two, I'm with Rich, so I've just kind of started flagging, and now I can pass the torch, you know?
Yeah.
Or we can sort of stumble, and I'll slow you down and you'll slow me down, and it'll be this lovely little stumble to the finish line.
I'm sure you'll be fine. But that's the way life goes. That's why you need groups of people.
Exactly.
I know, I read somewhere in a book once about, in the army, they did quite a lot of psychological testing of the soldiers, and they found that there were some people who were really good at the beginning of a project, of a mission, and they tended to fade. And then you needed some people who were good at the end. So if you consider it a project or anything, you need a group of people. And that's where I think a lot of photographers and videographers probably finding it hard, because you generally work on your own. So you've not got a team or a collective. So you're always having to motivate yourself. And if you're like me, I'm an extrovert. So I sort of feed off other people's energy. And if there's no energy to feed off, then you're sort of, you're just sucking air, as they say.
Preach, Rich. I feel you so much.
Perhaps we should have sort of Extroverts Anonymous or something. No, with extroverts it wouldn't be anonymous at all, would it? But,
it wouldn't.
Extroverts, please get to know me and spend time with me.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of what it's like to be a photographer, can you give us a little bit of background as to how you got into burlesque photography? So your name, the Burly Photographer, obviously means a burlesque photographer. You're also, I think you describe yourself as a big burly bloke,
That's me, yeah.
So the burly has two meanings. Yeah. I feel like it's quite a niche branch of photography to get into.
It's very niche.
How did that happen?
Like many things in my life, just through serendipity, really. It was an accident. I used to be a politician. I used to... I did. Your face, Rosh, that's terrible. You can't see this on the podcast, but Rosh has covered her face. She's got a bit pale.
Full of surprises.
I just wasn't expecting that to come out of your mouth.
Sorry.
I wasn't expecting that at all.
I was the bloke who'd knock on your door with a clipboard. My name's Richard. I'm your local candidate. Would you vote for me? And I discovered that you needed lots of photographs. You know, mobile phones didn't do the job. So I bought a camera and I started taking photographs of me shaking hands with dignitaries and emptying dustbins and filling dustbins up. There's lots of ridiculous photographs. There's apparently a really good website of councillors pointing at things. And I was one of those people pointing.
That sounds great. I'm here for that.
So I had a camera, and then I, for various reasons, I stopped being involved in politics. And I had a bit of a shock in 2010. I lost an election. No, 2011. I lost an election very badly, and it hit me really emotionally. It hit me really hard, and I found for quite a long time I found it very difficult to interact with people. And as a politician, that's a bit of a problem if you can't do that. But so I used to take my camera to parties. I even found it difficult to talk to people at parties. And so I used to take my camera to parties and take pictures of them, because I discovered I could hide behind the camera. I could be in the party, but not of the party. And so people would still think, oh yeah, Richard, he's a good bloke. He's come to all these events. But what they didn't realise was I never talked to anybody. I just took pictures. And then I moved into, someone asked me to photograph a gig. They had a band, and I started taking gig photos. And then there was an arts festival in the town I was living at the time in Reading, which is the Reading Fringe. And if you're ever in Reading and art ever comes back, the Reading Fringe is absolutely fantastic. I completely recommend it. There was a burlesque show, and they said, oh, there's this burlesque show, but nobody wants to photograph it. I was on the photography team, and they said, oh, why don't you do it, Richard? Or I volunteered. I can't remember which way it was. And I photographed a burlesque troupe called the Scarlet Vixens, who are still going strong.
We follow them on Instagram.
Yeah, they're cool. They're cool guys. So they're mainly in Reading. They show a little bit in Oxford at the Jericho. And I photographed their first ever performance. And it was my first ever burlesque show. It sort of went from there. And then I thought, well, it must be more to this. So let's go to London. So I approached some London producers and started photographing there. So I shot at first the Folly Mixtures at Madame Jojo's.
Wow.
And then with Tempest at Burlesque Idol, and then sort of went from there.
Amazing. Because you're so good at it. You've got such a great eye for, just the right poses and climax moments. And we've worked together once, haven't we?
Yes.
At the Bedford.
Yeah.
And those photos are just, I look at them every day because of social media, and I love them. I bloody love them.
Okay,
yeah, I do.
See, it's interesting. I don't see myself as very creative because I just photograph what I see in front of me. One of the problems I find in myself as a creative is that I find it very difficult to conceptualise a look, a form. So I see there are lots of really good photographers out there who I know people are having their profile shots at, and I feel a little bit jealous when I see their photos. But then I think I haven't got any ideas. Whereas if I go to a burlesque show, I think about being an extrovert. I feed off what you're doing, and I can see things that perhaps you can't see on the video, or I can see looks. And what I try to do now is I try to come up with a set of Instagrammable pictures. Because I can see what works on Instagram, and that's what I'm looking for.
That's a talent, isn't it?
Is it? I don't know. Is it really a talent? I don't know. It's just...
So that's how you know it's a talent, because lots of people can't do that and wish they could.
Oh, right.
So you must just have it naturally. Yeah. Maybe. Because you're like, how could you not see that was a thing?
And I think it's also really impressive because, for example, our shows, there's lots and lots of layers, and your photos have managed to capture all of those different layers. You have the moments of excitement, and then also the, more drawn back, the quieter moments, the reflective moments. You've managed to capture all of that, and I guess that's because you're also watching the show, aren't you? You're also watching it and experiencing it and feeling it as well.
That's very kind. It's interesting to get feedback because I just photograph what I see. It's not completely true. I've studied film and I've studied the image, and so I sort of know I understand the messages underneath it. But I look at what you guys do and I think, God, I could never think of that. I could never, how did you come up with that idea?
As you know, times are not easy for the starving cabaret artiste. That's why we're so thankful for Anchor. With Anchor, setting up the Invisible Cabaret podcast has been a breeze, leaving us more time to focus on the fun things like our next creative projects and where our next meal is coming from. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms besides. There's creation tools in-app that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. And, starving artists, listen up, Anchor even provides you with the opportunity to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And the best bit? It's completely free. Maximise your creativity with minimum fuss. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started and live your best podcast life. Happy creating. We now return you to your scheduled programming.
Well, actually, we would like a little bit of your input,
Oh, really?
I think.
Oh,
because we don't currently have any male identifying performers in our troupe, and we would like to at some point, because male mental health is such an important topic and we'd love to cover it. So as a man, what kind of things would you like to see on stage? What kind of things would you be interested in seeing Invisible Cabaret explore?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, because I know we had this conversation after your show that I photographed last year about male mental health. And it's a thing that, you know, the numbers of men committing suicide is so far ahead of the numbers of women. It's like a silent killer. I have to say, I think it's very difficult, because many people who identify as men, they deal with their problems differently. Guys in general, he says, and especially the older like me, don't really talk about your feelings, or you do talk about your feelings, but in an environment of piss-taking, drinking, and in general roughhousing each other. So at work, amongst the guys I work with, you know, a guy might come up, slap me over the back of the head, call me a C word, and say, "Are you all right?"
I mean, of course, that is the standard therapist opener when you go to a psychologist. That is the first thing they ask, isn't it? You know,
Of course.
so
In exactly that way.
in exactly those words, yeah.
But it's actually quite easy to respond to, because you could say, "I'm all right, fuck off,"
Yeah,
or "I'm having a bad day, fuck off."
yeah. Those are your options.
In saying that, guys tend to let out their emotional problems and their pains in very small packets. And one of the things I love jazz. An act I've been thinking about, I find when I play, I can express myself. I can feel, I have to use, I don't have agency, but my saxophone has agency. Does that make sense?
Wow, that's beautiful.
And so a lot of guys will use a metaphor or give agency to something else. You could see an act, go back to my act, me and Black playing the saxophone, playing something like Harlem Nocturne, which, if you know it, is a very soulful piece of music. But you can express that, and then a strip could go around you, or a tease could go around you. And we had the idea of using the saxophone as a clothes horse.
Cool. Nobody steal that, okay? That's copyrighted Richard Burly Photographer.
It's not. There's a performer called Vince Moon who does a rugby player. I don't know if you've seen Vince's...
No, I haven't seen
Vince
this.
is amazing. He does a rugby player strip, which deals with a lot of male tropes. It's got a thing about checking out the size of your member, but it ends with a boat race. You all went to Oxbridge, you know what boat race is.
We know about boat races, yeah.
Yeah, and it ends with a boat race. With himself. So he pulls a pint of beer over his head. His is very butch.
That sounds great.
My saxophone idea is probably a bit more feminine. You could probably, with guys, work on the basis of using words. Most of my friends speak to each other in a very aggressive and sweary way. But in that way, that seems to be the only way blokes can find to access their feelings. Oh, God, you make me cry now. That's not fair.
Oh, no.
Oh, mate.
And so what you might find there's a difficult juxtaposition between the aggressiveness of male communication and the softer, possibly more feminine way that you guys, when you're performing.
I get what you're saying, and I just think it's fascinating, though, because within all of this, obviously cabaret is really great and burlesque, both brilliant places for deconstructing gender, ideas of gender. The thing that I find more challenging is working out how to make sure that it's a space wherein the people on the very sort of male end of the spectrum, the kind of people who express themselves in that aggressive way that you're talking about, I always think it's quite difficult to maybe get a space right where they can feel comfortable if they're not comfortable with the more feminine ways of expression. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I do, precisely. And that's why I think maybe some spoken word might be a simpler way forward. Because have you read any John Cooper Clarke?
No, I haven't.
Oh, haven't you?
No.
Oh, you've got to get yourself... Sorry, I've got homework for you now. So
lovely.
If you listen to John Cooper Clarke, he's a Mancunian punk poet.
Yeah.
He talks a lot about the masculine condition, and he talks a lot about desire, and he talks about the difficulties. I mean, he's done everything. He's a sort of survivor from the late 70s. That sort of blokey humour, I think, works really well for guys. It works well for me, and I probably see myself at one end of the spectrum of sort of butchness.
Do you know who'd be really good to talk to about this kind of thing? It's actually my dad. So I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast yet, but my dad's a therapist. And if anybody ever met my dad and never knew what his career was, they would never in a million years guess that he was a therapist, because my dad talks like he's in Oliver Twist. So he's all cocksure, cool, blimey, Gavna, like genuinely talks like that, which is hilarious because I don't sound like that. And my dad listens to these podcasts, so shout out, Dad. He's able to connect with men of a certain generation, his generation, because when you chat to him, you just feel like you're chatting to someone down the pub.
Another guy that's worth talking to is, do you know Paulus? A lot of Paulus's songs really connect. He's got a song which he says is, "Who is my tribe?" or "Where is my tribe?" And I think a lot of guys are trying to find, if they've stumbled into the world of cabaret, they're trying to find their tribe. And it's incredibly difficult to talk about mental health, which is where we started the conversation. I mean, there are occasions when I really would rather die than tell someone that I am struggling. Honestly, I just wouldn't.
Do you know why, Richard? Without wishing to go too far into that.
It's a therapy session.
I'm sorry, I just have to ask though.
I mean, partly it's probably generational. I mean, I'm part of the generation that boys don't cry, and I think the song "Boys Don't Cry" is actually meant ironically. But I know when I listened to it, I thought, yeah, boys don't cry.
Right.
And you get into fights at school, and someone punches you in the face, and you just have to take it. You have to.
So it's learnt, is what you're saying.
It probably is. But it becomes natural, and that becomes perpetuating. But I think there is a generational difference. The generation of people I see coming through the cabaret world is much better equipped to deal with mental health and to deal with emotions. And that's one of the things I found actually quite difficult in lockdown. So I heard a report of the students who were stuck in Manchester or Scotland or somewhere, and someone said, "This is proving very bad for my well-being." And that had a complete moment of dissonance with my own self, because I just wouldn't talk about well-being in public like that. If you two were guys, I probably wouldn't be having a conversation like this now.
Isn't that something? I feel like a lot of people could connect with that.
Yeah.
I feel like you are not alone in feeling that way. 100%. 100%. But we have come to the point of our podcast where we talk about what we're grateful for this week.
Okay.
Rosie Verbose, would you like to kick us off this week?
Yeah, I certainly would. I am grateful for my local garden centre. The local garden centre has been one of the only places I have visited during this whole time. And my mum and I go about once a week for coffee and cake and a little look at the cacti, little amble around. They've got a little pick and mix for dog treats, which are now called special treats. And Totty knows what a special treat is. Totty is my dog, for clarification.
She's not around, is she? She's going to suddenly appear behind you and be like,
no,
a special treat?
No, thank goodness. I'm free to speak the words without repercussions. I'm so grateful because it's a local owned independent business as far as I know, and it's a little bastion of like peace in what is otherwise quite a turbulent time. So coffee and cake at the garden centre, that's my gratitude. What about you, Ferrero Rochelle?
I'm going to stand out as an oddball here because I can guarantee you not a lot of people identify with this, but I am grateful for the weather. I am grateful that it's no longer hot. I'm grateful that it's a bit shit. Look at Rich. He's like, what? I'm grateful.
Wrong.
I'm grateful for the rain. But if you hear my reason, it's not really that I'm grateful for the weather. I'm grateful that I've got a safe, warm house to come home to. Because I love cycling in the rain where I'm like, oh my God, it's miserable out here. It's just awful. I'm getting drenched. Because I know that when I get home, I'm going to have the best bath in the world, and I'm going to get in my comfy socks, and I'm going to get in my bed, and I'm going to drink a cup of tea, and it's going to be amazing. So that's when I actually say I'm grateful for the weather, I really mean I'm grateful for the warm, safe space where I can get out of the weather.
Interesting. Yeah, an important clarification. What about you, Richard?
Well, mine's actually very similar to yours. In the town I'm living in at the moment, there's a coffee shop run by a local church. And it's completely unchurchy. If you didn't know, it's called the Revive Coffee Shop, and they do the best cake ever. And they do pretty good coffee, and they let me sit in there. Hopefully they probably won't listen to a Cabaret podcast, so I'm probably safe to say this. But they'll let me stay there, 2 cups of coffee all day and 2 pieces of cake.
Lovely.
And it's really nice. And I go and sit down there and I process Cabaret photographs. Sometimes I have to do that with my back to the wall so nobody can see what I'm doing.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Editing boobs in a church is not necessarily the
Exactly.
best look.
But it's really nice. I completely get about sitting down and having a cup of coffee. I go once a week or twice a week, and it's just really nice just to sit in there. And I buy myself a train magazine. I'm very grateful for train magazines. I love trains. I just love
we
steam
didn't know
engines.
this about you
That's the
either.
loveliest thing I've ever heard.
So
That's
I sit
adorable.
I sit and read a train magazine and have a cup of coffee. It's fantastic.
What are the contents of a train? No, another time. I'm desperate to know, like, you can't interview the trains, right? So, like, what
They're pictures of trains, people's memories of trains, train trips people have been on. Steam engines. Steam engines are awesome. It's just because they're so beautiful.
Would I want to read a magazine about them, though? I don't know, Richard, but... It takes all sorts.
It's
okay.
This is what we're learning in this episode, is that it takes all sorts.
Exactly.
And Ros, you taught me this phrase, don't yuck someone else's yum.
Never yuck someone else's yum. I'm just curious
do it.
more than anything. No yucking here.
I'll send you, next time I see you, I'll bring a train magazine and you can read it.
Oh, you flirt, Richard.
I know how to treat a girl, eh?
Oh dear, we've got
Amazing.
some gratitude from people as well that they've sent in. So as always, guys, you can always DM us or comment on our social posts. You can even email us if you're feeling particularly fancy with what you're grateful for, and we'd love to add it to this section. So we have, I don't have a name attached to this, but Accidentally Swedish on Instagram. So many questions. They're grateful for Sweden's universal healthcare system. Hello. We love a healthcare system. Our lovely Didi La Femme, she says, I'm grateful for having a lovely garden to enjoy my coffee in, especially since I live in locked down Liverpool. Bless her heart. They've just gone into it, haven't they, as we're recording. So it's a whole thing. We've also had a gratitude from the lovely Mama Ferrero, Rochelle. Mama Ferrero. She says, so grateful for our lovely cosy house that welcomes us when we come home at the end of a long day like a big, comforting bear hug.
Guys, does this mean I'm turning into my mother?
Maybe. Hey, you all enjoy a bit of cozy. There's nothing wrong with that. Rush, would you like to see us out?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Rich, for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you on our podcast, a pleasure to catch up with you. You're a lovely, lovely gentleman. We cannot wait to get back into a performance space and have you snapping away again.
Yeah, can't
Fingers crossed it won't be too far away. Listeners, if you have anything else that you want to share with us, any gratitude you want to send our way, please do. You can reach us on all of the different socials that are out there. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can email us at invisiblecabaret@gmail.com. You can check out our website, invisiblecabaret.org. Please do have a peruse on there. There's lots of lovely things for you to see.
Before we go, Richard, do you have anything you'd like to plug? Anything you'd like to tell our listeners about?
Well, can I plug on somebody else's behalf? Is that all right?
Oh, hell yeah.
Sure.
Can I plug the fantastic Luscious Cabaret, which has started back, and I know that all performers and all performances need as much support as they can get, so I would really recommend, if people get the chance, until of course your next show is on, when obviously they should go there, but you know, look out for the Luscious Cabaret website and for Instagram for their next show, because it really is so fantastic to be back in Cabaret.
Yeah, and it's all socially distanced and stuff.
It's so safe.
Wonderful.
Brill. Oh, that's absolutely fantastic news. Thank you, Rich. What a lovely plug that was. Thank you.
And you can also go and find Richard's photographs on @the Burly Photographer. I'll do it for you, Richard, if you won't. And we're usually sharing your photos anyway, so...
I'd completely forgotten about that.
It's because you're such a gentleman.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Rosie Verbose, for being here as always. It's wonderful to have you.
Absolute pleasure.
I'm going to go and have a cup of tea.
Yep.
I invite our listeners to do the same. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you all soon, listeners. Thank you.
Be kind to yourselves. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.